Welcome. We are back. It is the Football Guys DFS show. It is week 1, and we have the crew back from last year. It's myself, Jeff Bell. We are joined with our DFS captain, Devin Knotts, and then we have Phil Alexander, the greatest Jets fan that I've ever met in my entire life is Phil Alexander, and we are here to break down both of your DraftKings and your FanDuel slates. We will run through our cash game plays, our GPP plays, our games of the week, our stacks, and as well as our discount plays. If you watched the show last year, we'll be doing much the same thing. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment if you have questions about DFS lineups or if you have areas that you want us to dive into. Please let us know. But right now, Devin, welcome back, and you kind of lead the ship here in DFS land, and maybe start off with what people should know for week 1, or if you just want to dive into what games you are looking at as well.
Yeah, I was trying to do the math. I think this is year 10 of this show. Might be year 9, but it's been going on for a long time. And I'm glad to be back. I'm glad it's still going. And I think about how many hours that is, and it makes me feel really old. But yeah, a lot of exciting things at Football Guys this year. So, we're right in the full season mode. I mean, I'm right after this, writing our rushing and passing matchups that'll be going on to our email subscribers. I told this, and I'll tout us a little bit here right before the show starts. Our monthly subscription at this point of the year, if you are a DFS subscriber, is cheaper than a full year. So it's only $20 a month. I think our full package is $100 for the year. So if you're only a DFS player, you're like, hey, I don't really need any of that other stuff. I'm just a DFS player. I give my entire FanDuel cash lineup each and every week, which last year I think we were 12-4, 13-3, something like that. And so it's a really good deal. We do ownership projections, roster projections from 4 different sources now. So there's a lot going on for just $20. You really need a tool to be competitive at this point in the game within DFS. So highly, highly recommend it. And take the Chiefs -3.
Chiefs -3. That's what we're
the sucker play. It's like the ultimate sucker play, but I'm a sucker for sports gambling, which is why I don't cover it. So DFS side, I'm a little bit better.
Well, is Taylor Swift going to be at the game? I think that's going to be the big
question.
They
broke up. I thought there were rumors they broke up.
Yeah, well, that's the rumors. They're planning it. I believe it's going to be September 28th is when they're going to break up. So, it breaks your heart to see that. But Phil, welcome back. Welcome in. We can go with the games of the week, Phil. You want to lead us off with what you're watching for this week and maybe where you're targeting?
Sure. We could start out, I guess, with the 2 games on the slate that have the highest over-under, according to Vegas. Jaguars at Dolphins at a 49.5 point total is my favorite. I think that's probably the game that I'm going to look to get the most exposure to. Texans favored on the road by 2.5 at the Colts with a 49.5 point over-under is another one that Vegas likes. Bills Cardinals 48.5 point total. I don't know what to do with that game exactly, but it's got a high total, one of 3 on the slate over 48. And then the things kind of get a little bit weird. They get a little bit week 1 where we don't know exactly what we're going to see. But I really like the Bears at Titans game, in particular the Bears side, which we'll talk about. And then there's some somewhat interesting games that now have kind of putrid totals, but I guess I'm really playing it more for sides. I like Commanders at Bucks 43.5. I think that game could go over the total. Chargers at home for the Raiders -3, 40.5 point total. And then we've got
week 1 if Phil listed every single.
we're back, baby. We're back.
Well, I'm just amazed we got past the
Talk
Bucs.
to me about
Phil
Panthers
giving a shout out for Baker Mayfield there. So
it's coming. Last one I was going to mention was Vikings -1.5 at the Giants, 41.5 point total. I think the Giants defense is fairly bad, so I could see myself taking a shot on some Vikings players. So
Yeah, that Vikings game feels to me either just a wild multiple pick sixes that we're looking at, it's 35-31, or it feels like it's going to be 13-10 and you're saying, what am I doing with my life? But that's one of those that can go either way. Devin, do you have any other ones that you're watching? I know the Browns and the Cowboys are kind of a premier matchup, but that's holding a lower point total. Are there other ones on your slate?
The Cowboys are going to light the Browns up. As a Browns fan, I think they're going to be in for a rough season. No, I think Phil covered it.
Phil usually does. Phil does a good job of that, but
he does a job.
I don't
know if it's good, but he does a job.
We can move into our cash game plays now. We have our quarterback plays and cash, and Devin, I guess maybe the question that we always kind of start with here on quarterbacks is, are you going down or are you going up? Are you kind of targeting some of these lower values, or are you spending up?
I mean, it depends what you call a lower value. I think for me, it's pretty clear this week. I've been saying it since the slate first came out. It's Jaden Daniels at 5,700 against Tampa Bay. This team is bad, right? I mean, Washington's defense was among the worst in the league, both against the pass and against the run. Yeah, Dan Quinn is coming back, but coming in, but you still have what's the saying? Jimmys and Joes versus X's and O's, and their corners are horrendous. So I think Jaden is going to be forced to do what he did at LSU, and that's run the ball, throw the ball. Brian Robinson's just okay. So I think this is a game where you're going to get 40, 50 yards from Jaden Daniels in rushing, and then probably, 240, 250 throwing with a touchdown or two. And at 5,700, I think that's more than acceptable for cash. Going further down, I mean, I don't know. I'm targeting rushing quarterbacks this year. It's sort of my strategy the last couple of years. And yeah, Sam Darnold against the Giants is tempting, but we'll talk about him in the GPP section. But I can't do it. And the rest of going down just isn't there. So for me, it's Jaden Daniels pretty easily.
Yeah, Phil, is that your line as well?
We go through FanDuel, just for those that are unaware, they did add a 300-yard passing bonus, 100-yard rushing bonus, and a 100-yard receiving bonus. So if you're playing over there and you haven't been checking the rules, they also added the Sunday night game for the slate, so we might add in that. I don't know, but they're making some changes this year. So
yeah, I did see the Sunday night. It was tripping me up a little bit. As I was going through my sheet to prep that. Yeah, we got Sunday night, and then that's a game worth mentioning too, because I think Rams Lions might have the highest total of the entire week, and on FanDuel, it's hard to avoid pieces of that game.
Yeah,
but Phil, do you have any other targets for your quarterbacks for cash games?
Yeah, I've got another rookie, Caleb Williams at 5,900. I mentioned that I like the Bears a lot at home, and I think that's what's given me a little bit of pause about Jaden Daniels. I would say up until like a couple of days ago, once I really started tossing the projections around, it was a given, like Devin said, all summer that Daniels was going to be the guy. Now I'm not so sure. I really like the Tampa Bay side of that game, and this is a rookie quarterback playing his first NFL game on the road, which, if I listen to my degenerate gambling uncle, that's like one of those rules that you live by is, bet against that side. Whereas Williams is at home, he's about the same price. That offense is loaded. It just is. It might be bumpy at times. It's Williams' first start, but he looked really, really good in the preseason, making throws that only a couple of guys in the league could make. And the Titans have to contend with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and they've got like a completely remade secondary that does have more talent than last year, but it's also like really thin. I think they have 4 cornerbacks like on the whole active roster, which is strange. So who knows what could happen in game there. And I don't know. I think it's a mismatch. And I think that Williams is in play for that 300-yard bonus. I think he could throw for more than 1 touchdown. And I think he could be sneaky enough to get you like 3 points with his legs at least, if he doesn't run one in because he's got mobility. So I guess to sum it up, there's value in the rookie quarterbacks this week.
I'll be at that game, and every Bears game I've ever been to has never been high scoring. So I'm using that logic to not.
No Bears team has ever been high scoring, so you bring in new world here. But I think Devin's on the right track there with Jaden Daniels talking about the rushing quarterbacks. I looked at Kyler Murray too at 6,400 on DraftKings, and then maybe might be a little bit more of a GPP play, but Anthony Richardson is sitting right there at 6,300 as well. And so yeah, those prices on those rushing quarterbacks, it's hard to avoid those, and we know the upside in those positions. We can move over to cash running backs now. And Phil, where are you going with your running back backfields?
Well, the first name that I clicked on when I started my kind of empty shell lineup, my placeholder was Chuba Hubbard at 5,300. It's not very exciting, but in terms of dollars per projected touch, I think it's between him and Jerome Ford. Ford's a little bit more expensive. He might have a little bit more competition. Hubbard definitely doesn't have a good matchup with New Orleans, but maybe that's balanced out a bit by the offensive surroundings on that team improving with Dave Canales now as the head coach. So I like Hubbard for the price. I think, at 5,300, he's a good bet to get you in that 15-point neighborhood. And then the other one that I'm playing is Rachaad White. One thing that I like to do in week one is kind of stick with what we do know, because there's going to be a lot of people out there excited to project what they think is going to happen. But I think we know that Rachaad White is going to handle a full load. I mean, Bucky Irving is fine. He's the kick returner and he's the backup, but I'm not going to let a rookie fourth rounder scare me off the guy who might have the most projectable workload on the slate, not in cash games anyway. From week 7 on last year, he scored in the 16 to 20 point range on DraftKings pretty much every week with a couple of spike weeks mixed in. I mentioned I really like Tampa Bay in this game. They're at home. They're favored, and that's one of the spots where I like to target cash game running backs. I think it's going to be a good game script for Tampa.
Devin, I've got Devon Achane like flashing at me like a bug light, but I feel like that might be a little bit more of a GPP play, but at 6,800. But is that on your radar? Are you going much different directions here in the cash game running backs?
Wasn't on my radar. I just don't believe that 8.5 yards per carry is going to continue. So I've been the touches for me. A running back is about touchdown opportunity plus the number of touches. And I mean, at 6,800, if I get burned by a long touchdown, then so be it. But he's a player that until further notice will not be in any of my cash games. GPP, I think he's fine. But I don't know. I don't understand all the hype. Like, he had 105 carries last year.
And he might play the slot. So when your receiver can play this, he might play the slot. So when your wide receiver or when your running back can play the slot, I mean, I don't know.
So he's Curtis Samuel. No. Alvin Kamara is the first name that popped for me. Carolina's run defense was horrible last year, and they've downgraded at almost every position on this defense. So on this rush defense, they lost their leading tackler. Yeah, they brought in Josie Jewell at linebacker, but he's being asked now to be the primary tackler for this team. He's never been that. He was always the secondary behind Alex Singleton in Denver. And this defensive line just isn't very good either. So the interior of the defensive line is very good. So Derek Brown, Shai Tuttle. But the outside, they have Jadeveon Clowney on the outside, who Clowney has been one of the most overrated players throughout his career, but he's been a horrific run stopper and is more of just like a pass rusher at this point in his career. So I think Kamara gets out wide and can have a big day against Carolina. In a similar vein, I think Kenneth Walker at 6,100 against Denver is in a good spot. Denver's another team that's really downgraded at at the linebacker position. So they have Baron Browning from Ohio State playing linebacker to replace Josie Jewell. And Browning, like, is a tweener that was playing defensive end last year. Now he's being asked to play some linebacker. Cody Barton is there, but he signed a 1-year, $2 million contract and is now going to be one of their primary tacklers. So I think that Walker could be in a really good spot this week. And then I like James Cook. I know he's expensive at 6,900, but like Buffalo could theoretically just run the ball 40 times with Josh Allen and James Cook and win this game. Arizona's defense is one of the worst in the NFL. And Cook should be in line for, I don't know, Jeff, you tell me, 15 to 20 touches a game?
Around there. They really like Ray Davis a lot. He's had a really strong camp, and they've been searching for that compliment. So I think Davis will pitch in there, but yeah, Cooks should be the featured back for the most part.
Yeah, and then like the last name that I'll mention, Javonte Williams, I think he might be more of a GPP play, but 5,500 is a little bit cheaper. Seattle lost a lot this offseason. So they lost Bobby Wagner, Jamal Adams, Quandre Diggs, and Jordan Brooks, who were their 4 snap leaders at linebacker and safety. And, Diggs, Adams, and Wagner all have had at least three Pro Bowlers, three Pro Bowl seasons throughout their career. So there's some gaps in some leadership that they have to fill. And they have another Ohio State linebacker, Jerome Baker, who's also being asked to be the primary ball tackler, and he's not really that guy. So I think Williams, if he gets carries, which is a little bit like, just talk about Jaleel McLaughlin. I'm not too concerned about it, but it's week 1, so you never know.
Yeah, I think that, I talked about Achane, but the other side of that, Raheem Mostert at 6,400 we obviously saw the season that Mostert put out in Miami and Jacksonville's a game that we mentioned that we're targeting. James Conner at 6,200. I mean, as a Bills fan, I don't think that defense is going to be what people have come to expect out of that defense, losing both of those, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, both gone, Matt Milano out of the lineup. I think that there's going to be a little bit of some growing pains on the defensive side, and I think Arizona might be able to push them points-wise. So those are 2 other ones. And then down at the very, very bottom, we don't know what it is, but Rico Dowdle at 4,600 is pretty cheap and supposed to be the lead back in Dallas. I mean, I still think that Ezekiel Elliott will still probably handle goal line and passing down work, but those are other ones that I saw on my radar. But we can move to wide receivers now. And Devin, are you hammering these high-end wide receivers? Because we have a lot of them in this particular window, or are you grabbing value to kind of build out this receiver room?
I think for cash, I'm trying to get CeeDee Lamb going up. Denzel Ward is frustrating to me. I mean, he's very good at times, but then he gives up some big games. Missed a lot of the preseason because he suffered his 5th concussion in his career. And I think Lamb is, now that Jefferson doesn't have a quarterback, Lamb is probably the best receiver in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, yeah, he's there, but he's not really a guy that I like to target in cash just because he's of that boom or bust upside. I'd rather have the volume from Lamb. But that means I have to spend down. And I think Terry McLaurin at 5,600 is a decent price. Again, targeting that Tampa Bay secondary that's undergone some turnover this offseason. And going down even further, I really liked what I saw from Jackson Smith and Jigba in the preseason. And at 4,900, yeah, there's competition there. And I just said I liked Kenneth Walker, so maybe that's a little bit difficult to fit both of those guys in. But, at 4,900, you're really focusing in on a guy who could, especially early on, break out from that ceiling performance, and I think he could take over as the number 1 there. And then the last guy I'll mention, Deontay Johnson at 5,300 going up against New Orleans. Should get to avoid Marshawn Lattimore, coming down to the slot quite a bit. And I think Bryce Young he has to be better than what he was last year. I mean, there's no way he'll be that bad again this year. And I'm not a believer of Chuba Hubbard. So I think that they're going to throw the ball quite a bit and try and get that rapport down with Deontay Johnson. And in a PPR setup at 5,300, he doesn't have to do a ton in order to get to his value.
Phil, I know you'd mentioned all the weapons and you liked Caleb Williams in this. There's a value that's standing out to me that's pretty screaming in that Bears receiver room. I don't know if you picked that one up or not, or where you're kind of heading with wide receivers this week.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you're talking about Rome Odunze on DraftKings.
Rome Odunze at 4,000 straight. That surprised me. That one seems very tempting. And I just saw a note today that Keenan Allen has a heel injury that he's kind of dealing with a little bit. So,
yeah, definitely did jump out to me. I don't know that I'm looking to go there in cash, but because I like Williams a lot, I'm sure that 4K is going to slip into a lot of GPP lineups. In cash, I actually think I'd like DJ Moore a little bit better at 6,500 to kind of add some juice to the Caleb Williams lineups. I'm always a fan anyway of at least having one small stack in the cash game lineup just to give it a little bit of an extra push. And that's the route that I was going to go just because it seems to fit. And I think we know that Moore is going to be out there on every snap. And we know how explosive he is. I'm going to push back on Devin for choosing CeeDee Lamb over Tyreek Hill. I heard him say that Hill is boom or bust. I mean, he had 3 games. I'm looking at the game logs here. Yeah, until he got hurt, which was like week 14, he had 3 games under 15 DraftKings points last year. And they were 15, 13, and 10. So
yeah,
not
but
total bust.
Not really like a great barrier. That's 7 for 75. Like if you're paying that price, you need 20 plus.
Which he hit in literally every other game besides those 3. So I mean, he's getting there consistently. And here's the deal. And maybe this isn't the most scientific thing, but that game is going to be played in South Florida. And I now live in South Florida. And I used to conceptually understand that it's pretty hot for a football game in September here and that it must be tough with the heat and the humidity. But guys, I could walk out my front door to the car, which is probably about 10 paces, and I've got under boob sweat, instantly.
Yeah, but they're playing Jacksonville. Come on. It's not like they're playing Minnesota.
No, but when you have to keep up on every single play with Tyreek Hill, I'm sorry. Those defensive backs are in for a really, really bad day. That is going to be a shootout, and Hill is going to score 2 long touchdowns. I'm not showing up. I don't know if I'm going to have a lineup, cash or GPP, that doesn't have Tyreek Hill in it this week. I'm not confident. You could put Darrelle Revis in his prime out there, and he's going to be bent over, catching his breath. I promise.
Careful. I mean, my problem.
It's been 100 degrees in Columbus, so I feel you, Phil. I can't even imagine doing anything.
When I was saying he's boomer bust, he has 2 games last year where he had over 10 catches. CeeDee Lamb had 7 games with over 10 catches. I'm looking at volume in cash games. I understand the boomer bust. I'll take the risk that if he doesn't break, if he breaks a long touchdown, it happens. And I understand the point. You're splitting hairs between Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. It's one or the other. And for me, I feel a little bit better about that PPR format on DraftKings. If it's FanDuel, I can I can understand Hill might have more yards than Lamb, but it's close. And my tiebreaker is just volume of targets.
Are you able to find enough relief on this slate to be able to maybe put both of them into a lineup?
I don't think so.
No, it was a a little bit of a weird week one. There's usually like some sort of obscene value or two that kind of rears its head. But I think with the abbreviated preseason and the teams wising up for the most part to not playing their players at all in those games, there really wasn't too many catastrophic injuries. I guess JJ McCarthy was probably the worst one, and that doesn't really affect us this week. So value. I think the value is in the rookies, right? We talked about the quarterbacks. We talked about Adunze. I've got one more, Ladd McConkey, for cash at 4,700. It's actually either Josh Palmer or Ladd McConkey. Palmer is 5,200 on DraftKings. I'm going to lean towards McConkey because Matt Waldman seems to like him pretty good, which is usually a good sign. Shout out to Matt. And I'm not really convinced that Palmer is any better than like a league average receiver. So I don't know that he's going to take targets away from McConkey. But I think that one of those guys is going to get like 8 targets. And in that, 45 to 55 range against the Raiders secondary, I think you could do worse.
Yeah, I think Palmer is more of a FanDuel play for me. He's a flat 5,000 over there. Ladd McConkey's 5,300 over there on FanDuel. So if you were to split the two of them, and I would rather play Palmer on that slate. Khalil Shakur, you want to see it happen first, probably, but at 5,100, in Buffalo's going to be able to put up some points, and that one is interesting to me. Being able to play both sides of this Commanders and Tampa Bay game that we talked about with Mike Evans going against what was a porous, horrible Washington defense last year, and then Terry McLaurin coming back at 5,600, both stood out, and then. For me on FanDuel, 7,000 Cooper Kupp with the Sunday slate being on there, that's really hard for me not to put into a lineup at 7,000 on Cooper Kupp right now. And he's less than Jaden Waddle, who has been injured. I mean, I'd rather have Cooper Kupp there in that Detroit potential shootout. But we can move to tight ends now. And are we going to do some Taysom Hill here on tight ends? Or are we going to have some real tight ends? Or what are we going to do?
Not going Taysom Hill. I think is he a quarterback on DraftKings or is he a tight end?
Tight end on both slates.
Yeah. I need to fix our optimizer because he's showing up as a quarterback. I think it's Kyle Pitts for me, 4,600. I think, looking at Pitts, like the last real quarterback he had was Matt Ryan. In his year, and he had 1,000-yard season or pretty darn close to it. He's a guy that, look, he could get close to an. I don't know that his ceiling is much more than Evan Ingram, like a volume guy who isn't going to have like huge yardage, but could have some end zone work. But at 4,600, he's certainly the most athletic. Or non-rookie, I should say, because Brock Bowers is right below him, but I'm not doing that. The other name that I'll throw out there is Jake Ferguson. So if you're not going CeeDee Lamb, I think I'm extremely high on Ferguson. He was top 3 or 4 in tight ends in red zone looks last year. Might have been second. Now that I think about it, I don't have it in front of me. But had a lot of volume in the red zone, just couldn't find the end zone, which those things typically normalize over the last couple of years, over an extended period of time. He's entering his 3rd season. Brandon Cooks is not good at football anymore. And who else are they going to throw to? They don't have a running game. I think Ferguson could be a target machine for Dak and company.
Are you eyeing the same thing, Phil, or do you have other plays on tight ends for cash games?
Definitely like the calls on Pitts and Ferguson. I'd be a little bit happier to play Pitts in cash if that hamstring injury that we read about today hadn't surfaced, but it looks like he's fine. He said that, he's like, relax guys. I missed like 2 series in practice. Like I'm fine. So yeah, I think that's a good play. The one name I'd actually add 2 names. One is Evan Ingram. At 5,500 on DraftKings, you'd probably have to punt somewhere else in your lineup to fit him in, like maybe you do play Roma Dunze in cash, and then you could get Engram in the lineup, but that's just simple. I mean, DraftKings is a full PPR site, and Engram led all tight ends in catches last year. And Jacksonville, Miami, in my opinion, is the shootout of the week. And then there's one more. Is anybody interested in the punt with Munt strategy?
I like that name. That's down there. It's definitely been stashing him in my deeper dynasty leagues because it seems to be off the radar here. But I think that might be a little bit more GPP land. The one other name that
I'm not.
What's that?
I said no, I'm not.
We'll get you there, Devin. You'll see.
I mean, listen, just in Munt's defense, the price on DraftKings is $2,900, and that target tree in Minnesota this week is really getting narrow. You've got Jefferson, and then you've got Addison, who's got an ankle injury. He'll probably play, but how effective is he going to be? And their number 3 receiver, Jalen Naylor, is also dealing with a lower body injury. We know that Hawkinson is out. So, I think Sam Darnold's going to chuck it some. And I think that it's Munt by default outside of Jefferson. And, you could use that savings to get creative elsewhere. So, yeah, it's risky.
I'd rather just take a chance on Ben Sinnott at 2,700. I don't know.
Go Zach Ertz than Ben Sinnott at 30.
Well, he's 30. He's almost 1,000 more, right? But
yeah.
And then Cole Kmet guaranteed that he would score me a touchdown when I played golf with him this summer. So
there you go.
Shout out my boy.
You might have to anytime touchdown there, Cole Kmet. We'll do it for
probably
Devin.
Not going to happen because he had a few libations when he was saying that. But hey,
if I would have known that Devin was Cole Kmet's Make-A-Wish kid, I mean, my entire strategy would have changed.
That was a good one. You used your good one in week 1. Congratulations.
We'll wait another 6 weeks before we get another one. But Jonnu Smith, I want to see with that one. That might be more GPP, but 3,500 Jonnu Smith. I'm just intrigued. I'm intrigued from Jonnu Smith and the Mike McDaniel offense. But again, I want to see that first. But that's kind of where I am on tight ends. But make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a Hall of Fame subscriber. Devin mentioned it leading off, less than $100. Right now, we've got a special that you can grab right now for the entire season. I believe it's about $86 to be able to have that DFS membership for the whole year. And we can't throw out any sort of guarantees or anything like that, but we're certainly going to do our very best to make sure that you get your money's worth and win more than $86 on using Football Guys. But we got you covered this year, and so make sure to check that out. We can move to GPP plays now. And is this still a Jaden Daniels in a GPP, or are we mixing this up here with some of these values around the board? Where are you going, Devin?
He's going to be popular, extremely popular. So with that, I don't feel great about it, to be honest, as a GPP play. I mean, it's a rookie making his first start on the road. We talked about that, blah, 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 blah. He runs for 40 yards, throws for 220. You're not really, and he only gets a touchdown. You're not really feeling all that good about it as a GPP play. So I'm probably not going that route. I'll start with a couple obvious guys and then get a little weird. I think let's just get weird. Bo Nix, $5,000. If you want to get to Lamb and Hill, he's a way to do it. I think he's looked in the preseason. I think he's looked the best of any of the rookies thus far. And I know Phil's about to lose his mind because he's in love with Caleb Williams. Caleb looked fine. I thought Bo, in terms of where my expectations were compared to where he's actually shown, I think I didn't think he could throw the ball more than 5 yards on the field because he didn't at Oregon. And so I think he's in a spot where he could be a good play. And what if this Dallas game shoots out? Cleveland has these, we talked about it last year where Cleveland just has a couple games a year where it's weird and all of a sudden it's two good defenses, but it turns into 35-31. So I like Deshaun Watson, who nobody likes because all the vibes are negative. All of them. He doesn't want to play anymore. He's just in for the money and blah, 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 blah. He still has Jerry Jeudy and Amari Cooper. Doesn't have a run game. I'm sorry. Jerome Ford is awful. And David Njoku is there. I think that if the Browns are going to be competitive, they've said that they want to air it out this year. Watson in his last start threw for like 280. He was perfect before he in the second half against the Ravens. It's kind of make or break for him this season. I think things are going to get weird in Cleveland if he has a bad year. And then I think Kyler Murray is the last name I'll throw out there. I think he's in a really good spot to bounce back early in the season before he gets hurt. Like seemingly he always nicked up, but I think he's going to run more this year. He has Marvin Harrison, who we can talk about him at the wide receiver position. I like some other receivers there a little bit better. I think Harrison will struggle early on. But yeah, I think that those are some guys that are like way deep off the radar that are going to be sub 2-3%. And then Anthony Richardson is like going to be popular, so I'm not going to really talk too much about him, but when he's healthy, you have to consider him.
Phil, now's your chance. Sell us on Baker Mayfield. First time of the year.
To tell you the truth, I don't think that Baker Mayfield is a terrible tournament play. Again, just because I'm a big fan of the Tampa Bay side in that game against Washington. And I think that I guess we'll get to it, but I really do like Mike Evans, one of his receivers. And I know that is one of our old friend John Lee's rules, that if the wide receiver is coming up high on your list, chances are you do want to pair them with your quarterback. So that's the case for Baker Mayfield. Just in a pretty good spot generally against the bad defense, playing at home as a favorite. The other name that I was going to give was Trevor Lawrence. Well, two names, really the quarterbacks in that game that I can't stop speaking about, Miami, Jacksonville. I think that Lawrence and Tua are both good plays. Tua in particular because he's priced way too high on DraftKings, 7,000. And then you got to fit that in with Tyreek Hill. And, if you want to double stack it and get Waddle in there, now you're scraping. But I think that's going to get you a different build in larger fields. And then I think that Lawrence is kind of under the radar right now. I think he's back healthy. We've seen him hit 25 to 30 DraftKings points with regularity. I like what they did at receiver, putting Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas around Christian Kirk. They've got Evan Ingram. And I think that they're going to have to keep up with Miami. So I could definitely see at least a 25-point game, which you would take at 6,200 for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I was thinking Lawrence as well. Kirk Cousins, 6,100. Going up against Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers. Some emotion in that game playing in the Dome. I mean, Cousins way off the radar, coming off that Achilles. I think that the Falcons' offense is going to look a lot different than what people expect. And Cousins is very comfortable in that scheme. So that's one I think that will probably come in pretty low ownership. That if you wanted to stack some of these other, we talked about Kyle Pitts in your cash game plays. I think Drake London's got an appealing price. So that's just one other one that is a little bit on my mind relative to still probably want these rushing quarterbacks, but we can move into running backs now. And who we got at running back? Are you going? I know Jerome Ford is a name that's not been mentioned yet. Is that somebody on your radar, Devin? Or are you kind of where are you going with running backs?
No, I'm not a Jerome Ford fan. I think he was propped up by a couple long touchdowns last year. I know he's popping in some optimizers, but I'm just not doing it. Ramondre Stevenson at 5,900 against Cincinnati. I don't know what's going on with Cincinnati, but some weird vibes there. They lost DJ Reader up the middle, which is a huge loss. He went to Detroit. Which is a huge get for the Lions and their defense. But I don't know. Stevenson just has a couple big games a year, which they're going to lean on him with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback this year. I talked about Javonte Williams at 5,500. I think he's in a really good spot this week with Seattle with all the turnover that they've had on their defense. What's going on with Aaron Jones?
He's mad. He's motivated.
Like, he's going up against a very bad defense in the Giants. Bobby Okereke is a tackle machine, but like the rest of that defense is pretty bad. And I don't know. He's a guy that like I feel like never got a chance. And there's always AJ Dillon, or there was always like some reason why he wasn't getting the full complement of carries. But when he did, like he would pop off these big games at times. So I think Aaron Jones is at least intriguing to have upside. And the last name I'll throw out there, it's too expensive. No, Phil, go, and then I'll just come back if I have anything.
Okay. I'll lead off with a question to Jeff, because I believe you did the Atlanta Falcons training camp report write-ups, right?
I did. Yes.
All right. So if you were going to set odds of Raheem Morris's early offseason quote about Bijan Robinson being used like Christian McCaffrey, what percentage chance would you say that has of actually being true?
Low. Tyler Algier is going to play. Tyler Algier has consistently played with the ones, and I do expect that he's going to get carries. And so that's where I just don't see the McCaffrey usage for Bijan Robinson. I think that Algier is not a slouch. Algier is the type of player that would be contributing in just about any backfield in the league, and they're going to use him. But Robinson, there's still certainly upside there, and especially early in the season here when there's that narrative out there about Algier. So to be able to kind of play in that, maybe bet on some low ownership for Bijan Robinson because people want to see how that's going to break. I mean, that could be a spot.
So would you say that it's more or less than 10%? Because that's about where I would peg his ownership in large fields.
10% is a good number. I would say maybe a little bit. I mean, he's not going to be Christian McCaffrey usage. I just would be shocked if Tyler Algier is sitting on the bench, not touching the ball at all.
Okay. That's how I was looking at it, is that if there is in fact a 10% chance that he does handle that number of touches, I think I want him in my GPP lineup. He's one of the few running backs who could break the slate.
Yeah.
At 7,700 though, he's too expensive for cash. Definitely a tournament play. The other guy that I was looking at, well, I've got a couple more. One that kind of goes against my better judgment because I've been vocal all offseason about fading this guy in just about every format. But Zamir White at 5,700. I'm expecting the Chargers defense to look different and better with Jim Harbaugh in town. But they were kind of leaky against the run last year, so they've still got something to prove. I think you're going to see Zamir White get at least 15 carries. And where I think it gets sneaky is that he's playing with Gardner Minshew as his quarterback. And Minshew is a check down machine. We saw Leonard Fournette get 100 targets that year that Minshew was the starter for the full season in Jacksonville. And I know that White isn't going to be the passing down guy, or at least I don't think he's going to be. But when you're playing with a quarterback that's checking the ball down that much, all you need to be is on the field to catch a bunch of passes. So if he gets 15 carries and then he sneaks like another 5 receptions or so, I'm definitely interested in Zamir White. And then the other spot I was looking at was Cincinnati. Cincinnati is the biggest favorite on this slate against New England. New England lost some pieces on defense as well. And I think the ownership on both Chase Brown and Zach Moss, definitely Zach Moss, because Chase Brown is pretty cheap, so he might get a few looks. But both of those guys should be pretty low because nobody knows who to play. And I think that you could just play them both. Obviously not in the same lineup, but that's the beauty part of DFS, right? We could play more than one. So I think I would split the exposure on those two with a slight lean towards Brown, even though he'll be a little bit higher owned just because he is cheaper and, he's the guy that could run like 22 miles an hour or something like that, so that gives him a higher ceiling in my opinion.
We talked about the Texans and the Colts as a game of the week at the very start. And we mentioned Anthony Richardson, but other than that, we haven't really talked about that at all. But Joe Mixon's sitting here at 6,600, and we don't know what that Texans backfield is going to look like, but there's a chance that Joe Mixon is bell cow in and going against a Colts defense that allowed the fourth most points against by a running back last year. So that one kind of feels, I mean, we haven't talked about it yet. So that's a
I
little bit
hate
under
Joe
the radar,
Mixon.
maybe, but I do too. Everybody does, but yes, that's out there. But
3.6 yards per carry. Here we go.
yeah, and then the other one that Ray Davis, I would against the Cardinals defense that was the worst against running backs in a game the Bills could potentially control. If Ray Davis were to find the end zone a time or two and end up at 50 to 60 yards, total yards, I wouldn't be shocked at 4,500 at the very, very bottom there. But we can move to wide receivers now. Wide receivers are always fun in GPP plays. And Phil, how are you building out your wide receiver lineups?
Sure. So Christian Kirk at 5,500. I have not stopped talking about that game still in Miami. I think he's
Have
just
you been listening to like local radio or the ABC News or like?
My opinion is totally slanted because of the heat. It's the heat factor. Trust me on this one, guys. I just think he's Lawrence's most trusted wide receiver in a potential shootout. He's priced, very middle of the road. I think he's in a pretty good spot. Mike Evans, we talked about. Washington, I think, has the worst secondary in the NFL. Devin might be able to correct me, but it's definitely one of the worst. Chris Godwin looks okay too. As I'm looking through the list, but I think that Mayfield just has a connection with Evans based on what we saw last season, and Evans is the guy that scores touchdowns. Justin Jefferson, right? So the tournament pivot off of Lamb and Hill in that price range, I think, is Jefferson. I mean, he's going to roast that Giants secondary. If he had Kirk Cousins as his quarterback still, I'd probably be considering him in cash over Tyreek. That's how much I like the matchup. So, he might be capped around 100 yards and a touchdown, 5 catches or so with Darnold, but we don't necessarily know that. There's a chance that Giants defense is really that bad. And if that's the case, then Jefferson could have a completely bonkers game. And then I do like the Texans wide receivers in tournaments. I think that's another one of those spots that's kind of like the Cincinnati running backs. Nobody knows who to play, right? Whereas I think that you could mix in Diggs and especially Nico Collins. I think has a
problem
big
is
tournament
he's 7K.
ceiling. Right, which is why nobody's going to play him because nobody knows what to expect. But, again, in week one, I like going with things that I've seen before, because it's kind of more projectable. And we've seen a great rapport between CJ Stroud and Nico Collins. I like the really good players in really good spots with moderate ownership. So they'll definitely be sprinkled into some lineups.
Yeah, I mean, the narrative in that game is, I think if people are going to target somebody, it's going to be Stephon Diggs, because the narrative is he's going to kill CJ Stroud if he doesn't get targets, based on his sideline tantrums. A name that nobody, like literally I haven't heard anywhere this week is Devontae Adams. And, whether it's the Chargers defense that people are afraid of, they weren't all that great last year, but like, hey, Jim Harbaugh is, I don't know. 7,600. He had 175 targets last year. I understand he struggled a little bit compared to Devontae Adams, like historically, but he was going to get traded, and then he didn't get traded, and they decided to keep him. I think they come out and throw him the ball 10 plus times in this game to try and calm down some of those trade aspirations there. I think Jalen Waddle is underpriced compared to a lot of people are going to be looking at Tyreek Hill. And Waddle is a little bit underpriced compared to where I think his upside could be. On the other side of the ball, he's cheap and probably going to be a little bit underlooked this week is Brian Thomas at 4,700. Downfield threat coming from LSU as a rookie. Sort of, I mean, it's a weird team because you really have three speed guys in Kirk, Thomas, and Gabe Davis. And I guess Evan Ingram's going to get a lot of the underneath stuff. I guess Kirk could do that too, but Thomas is a deep threat. I think he averaged 17 or 18 yards per catch at LSU last year. And then I'm trying to figure out the fade of Marvin Harrison. And maybe it's Trey McBride at tight end, but I don't know. I think he's going to struggle out of the gate because he's going to have to deal with double team pretty much every single time without any help on that team. I mean, you have Greg Dortch and like these other Michael Wilson. Like none of these guys defenses should fear. So I would fade Marvin Harrison this week. And I think that's it for me. Yeah, that's it.
Curtis Samuel, 4,900, going up against the Cardinals. That there's been talk that his injury wasn't quite as bad as it was initially reported, and there hasn't been a lot of concern about him missing that game. Rashid Shaheed at 4,400, and there's some fun things maybe you can do with Rashid Shaheed and Taysom Hill in the same lineup, that going up against the Panthers defense that's very exploitable. Roma Dunze again at 4,000. I just feel like that's screaming value. Adonai Mitchell at 3,800 has a lot of potential to go off in what could be a shootout game. And then Jalen McMillan way down the board, 3,300. If you were to play a pivot off of where people are going on the Buccaneers wide receivers, Jalen McMillan has been a talk of camp as a player that kind of has stepped forward as that wide receiver 3. So that's, again, against the Commanders defense that's been horrible against the pass historically. But tight ends, this is where we talk about Johnny Munt, but is there other directions that you're going to go on tight ends here, Phil?
So yeah, I've got the punt with Munt in this section again. I've also got Kyle Pitts, who we spoke about, and the other one that I saw, I think he's got a similar ceiling and a pretty similar price to Evan Ingram, is David Njoku, who is not going to get many clicks this week. And, I think he showed down the stretch last year. Devin talked about it. If that game does shoot out and they do go pass heavy, Njoku is in a good spot there.
Yeah, choose whoever you like here. I'm going to go Ferguson again. I think he gets 8 to 10 touchdowns this year based on the red zone volume. I think he should be higher than David Njoku, and for that reason, I think he's a guy that certainly looking at. Brock Bowers, if you just want the narrative that they try and get him a touchdown in his first game at 4,500, you could certainly do worse. I think he'll at least get a target in the red zone with a play drawn up for him if they get down there. And then beyond that, like a lot of the better tight ends aren't on this slate. So, Pitts is certainly a guy that you could play, and I can't do Taysom Hill. I understand why. I get it. But I don't know. I'm saving my money elsewhere.
I get it. 3,000 Greg Dulcich is there's been some positive buzz around there. So if you're going to play a punt, that's kind of in that same Johnny Munt territory, but for 3,000. And then dirt cheap, bottom of the barrel, 2,500 Theo Johnson. If you really, really wanted to punt the position, an athlete that has the potential to break off a big play, maybe that kind of a little bit of a wild card out there for Theo. It sounds like Theo Johnson has kind of been the Giants. I know he's a Penn State guy that never did anything at Penn State.
Guys that just like, who was it last year?
Well, Penn State has these athletes that just blow your mind that never do anything too. But
yeah, Giants just have like these. We have these tight end fantasies of like who's going to be the next Evan Ingram, and then like nobody ever steps into that role.
Well, now we have good tight ends, so people don't do it anymore. But yeah, no, he's the next one. So,
all right.
Favorite stacks. All right, let's go, Devin. What's your favorite stack of the week?
Favorite stack. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson.
I like it.
I think the Browns are in for it this week, boys.
All right.
From Devin, the Browns fan. Phil, what's your favorite stack for the week?
I'll give you a couple like I usually do, but it's the Miami-Jacksonville game, so do it either way.
Take an over-under on how many quarterbacks he's going to name.
It's not that many, I promise. But, Tua, Hill, Waddle, I think could do really well. I think I might have mentioned that already. Lawrence, Kirk, and then run it back with both Hill and Waddle. Just stack that game. And then shout out to football guys, Dan Hendry, who has been beating this drum for a while. Justin Herbert, people are acting like because Jim Harbaugh is the coach now that like Herbert's arm fell off and that he's not a good quarterback anymore. But I just don't see it. I mean, they should be able to move the ball just fine in that matchup against the Raiders. The receivers are cheap, and nobody's really going to be on Herbert. So I think you could go Herbert, run it back with Zamir White, who I mentioned that I like on the other side, and then both cheap receivers that I mentioned, Palmer and McConkey, or play one of those receivers, and you could get really cheap and unique and pair Herbert with Hayden Hurst at tight end.
So the Chargers were another team that I covered for the training camp reports, and they're going to throw the ball more than people realize. So I like that call out there with Justin Herbert. My favorite stack, just because it's going to be a lot of fun next week if something happens, I would go with Taysom Hill and Rashid Shaheed as my favorite stack for the week, because we'll have a lot of fun a week too if they do something there. But no, I think overall, I mean, you probably look at the top of the board here with Josh Allen at 8,000, and then you can kind of pair him with, I talked about both Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel. I think that there's some options there on what a Bills offense that should go off with Josh Allen there at the top and some cheap options that you can play on the back end. So a little bit of homerism to throw out for week one right now.
Let's do something fun. So
yeah.
Whoever gets the closest, post it in the comments to the number of DraftKings points that Taysom Hill scores this week will get a signed Taysom Hill mini helmet.
There we go. Start it off, people. All right. That last, we're going to do our favorite cheap plays or our favorite discount plays. And Phil, what's your favorite discount play?
I think Odunze at 4,000 is probably the best value play on the slate that I could see. It's a little bit of a projection. It's a little bit scary, but if you believe like I do that Caleb Williams has a big game, we've seen that rookie to rookie connection flash in the preseason a couple times. And really one big play is all he needs to pay off that $4,000 price tag. So I think he's certainly underpriced.
What do you got, Devin?
So depends what Jamar Chase plays in full, and we're recording on Wednesday. So if he doesn't, Andre Iosivas, or however you pronounce his name, at 3,000.
Yoshivas.
You guys do so good. It's always the same thing every week. I've got these random names that I'm thinking about. We don't go the entire show without mentioning Andre Yoshivas, and then I let Devin go, and he pulls it off because that's what he does.
But no, I'll let Jeff talk about him. I'll just go Jackson Smith and Jigba at 4,900.
Well, I do like Andre Yoshivas at 3,000. That stood out to me, that kind of that deep dart play there at 3,000. I did think in my mind a little bit Jalen Tolbert as a potential pivot at 3,400. If you wanted to play the Cowboys putting up some points, and Brandon Cooks, I don't know that he's going to be playing in that game. So that's a interesting kind of pivot off of where a lot of other people will end up. But that's our show for this
the
week.
Ball in New England, like, is Jalen Polk?
What's that?
Is Jalen Polk a thing this year?
I think that Pop Douglas is the thing of anything, because that Alex Van Pelt offense that about as a Browns fan working
I forgot he was there. Just cancel this.
They're just going to throw it to Ramondre Stevenson 7 times. And
no, they're going to throw it to the opposition
11 points.
It's very much the Bengals defense. Alex Van Pelt should not be in the NFL. But
all right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck here in week 1. And, again, leave your comments. And just like Devin said, leave that total DraftKings points for Taysom Hill, and whoever is closest, we're going to get you a signed Taysom Hill mini helmet. But Devin Knotts for Phil Alexander, I'm Jeff Bell, and thank you so much.